Hey everybody, welcome back to another video. I hope you guys are all having a wonderful Monday. As most of the United States gets closer to winter time, I thought today would be the perfect opportunity to talk about stuck shed and dried food on your crested geckos. Now this is a pretty common issue, and with it being pretty common, it also can lead to some physical negative effects on your gecko if not taken care of in a timely manner. Your gecko can lose a tail tip, toe tips, toes, and sometimes whole feet. So it's very important to keep an eye on your geckos and make sure they're not getting stuck shed and getting dried food on them. Obviously, proper humidity can help negate this problem, but still, sometimes even with the best humidity, geckos are going to get little pieces of stuck shed, especially around their toes and feet. So to really understand this, I thought we'd start with a interesting demonstration. So I'm going to be using this Christmas sock here today to represent gecko skin. So pretend this is gecko skin, right, this sock, and my hand, let's just pretend it's a gecko toe, okay? So just for the sake of this video, I think this will kind of help you understand a little bit better. So I'm going to put this sock on quick. Okay, so I got the sock on, it's on the gecko toe. Let's pretend this is a normal shed, right? So your gecko is going to be shedding normally. So in the perfect world, their shed would rub off or come off in one nice piece, just like this. And you can see then their toe would be perfectly clear, no shed or anything like that stuck on it. What I've noticed is generally it's on the toes first of all, and then normally this is what happens. So you can see the sheds coming off, right? But then it gets bunched up right near the tip of the toe, usually around the claw areas where it gets stuck. But unfortunately, crested geckos have curved claws, which also doesn't help the skin come off any easier. But when it's bunched up right here, there is a lot of tension. It's very tight right there. So if you're just trying to pull on it, it's not going to come off very easily. So usually pulling on it from the end or trying to kind of roll it off is your best bet, especially if it's stuck shed. Stuck shed is probably harder to get off than dried food, because with dried food you can just get it wet and it'll rub off, but stuck shed is a little bit different because it's all in one piece, especially if it's all bunched up. It can be very tight on your gecko's toe tip. So that's why you need to get it off in a timely manner. But I wanted to show you too what can happen if you don't get it off in a timely manner. So here's a gecko from last year. You can see this is the back right foot. Unfortunately, I was not able to get to this gecko in time and it lost most of its toes. And this is what can happen if you don't get to your gecko in time. So obviously a gecko with no toes isn't preferable, but that being said, it doesn't really affect their breeding. But obviously you want your gecko to have toes. Now moving on a little bit from the dry shed, let's talk a little bit about dried food. You can see here I have a tray that I used to feed geckos last night with a bunch of dried food on it. And you can see here how hard this food is. I'm trying to crust it off. It's kind of breaking off in little pieces. And this would actually be a better scenario probably than stuck shed on the toes, just because once it gets wet, it's very easy to get off. So stuck food I would say is better than stuck shed. And I'm going to show you guys how you can get this off today. And it's pretty easy to get off too, which is nice. So before you can get into actually getting the skin off, you're going to need a couple things here. You can use a couple different things. So of course you can use your lovely fingers to try and gently press it off. You can also use a Q-tip, which is my preferred method of getting dried food and skin off. And the last thing that you can try and use is a tweezers. I'm going to recommend some caution against this. I'm going to talk about that a little bit later on why you need to be very careful using the tweezers, but it can come in handy in certain situations. So those are the methods to actually get it off itself. But to get your gecko prepped to get dried food and dried skin off, what you're going to need is a mister. Obviously, you're going to need some water. And you're also going to need a deli cup that has holes in it and a piece of paper towel in there. Now, the reason it needs holes is because your gecko is going to be in here for a period of time. And obviously, you want them to be able to breathe. You don't want to suffocate them in their little container. And depending on how long you're leaving them in there, the holes may be more necessary. Now, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be soaking our gecko in water to get the skin or the food softened up so we can get it off, right? Now, this is a little bit different than when you're packaging up geckos because now you want a lot of water. Some people put them in a little bit of standing water. I generally use a very wet paper towel. You can see here how wet this looks, and I'm going to pick it up just to show you that there's actual water coming like dripping out of it. So this is very moist. It's just soaked. This is just a method I like to do with the paper towel. It usually soaks up pretty well into their dried skin or dried food. And generally, depending on how bad their foot is, depends on how long I leave them in here. Anywhere from 15 minutes if it's just a little toe, to up to an hour or more if their whole leg is covered in food or shed or whatever. It really just kind of depends. Use your best judgment. Stuck shed takes a little bit longer to get moistened up than dried food does, so that's also something to consider. But I would say try maybe 30 minutes to start, and go from there. And you'll be able to tell when it's soft or when it's not. So Ice here was nice enough to let me use her as a demonstration gecko today. I don't actually have any geckos that have any stuck shed right now, but I'm going to still show you the method I used to get it off on our little friend Ice here. So she's a very nice demonstration subject. So what I would usually do is I'd get the Q-tip wet. It just helps pick up the food a little bit more, especially if it's dried on their toes. And then I go from their foot out to the tip of their toe, trying to roll the food off, just like this. You're trying to roll it off very gently. And you can hold the gecko or you can place them down on a flat surface, whichever you think would be easier. And I won't lie to you, no gecko is going to like having their toes touched. They're going to squirm a little bit. They're going to move their toes. For whatever reason, geckos don't like having their feet touched. So just know that this is going to be a little bit difficult and it can stress out your gecko a little bit. So if your gecko is really, really bad, they have a bunch of feet, I'd maybe recommend trying this over a span of a day or two, just to kind of break it up a little bit. Also, I won't lie, doing baby geckos is 10 times harder than doing adult geckos like this. You have to be much more careful. Their little toes are so delicate. You don't want to press too hard on anything. So just use your best judgment. That's really what it comes down to. But I'm always rolling out from the foot, out to the toe tip, and hopefully getting that food off. Now, if it's stuck shed, I'm doing the same thing. However, sometimes it's better to use your fingers for stuck shed, just because it can get stuck around their claws. And when you're trying to get it out from under the claws, it can be very difficult with the Q-tip. And sometimes the Q-tip gets stuck in their claws too. So I'd maybe recommend using your fingers if they have stuck shed, using a Q-tip if it's dried food. But I'm always rolling out. You're trying to roll it away from them and get it off of them. So you don't want to roll upwards. And it's kind of the way their scales tend to flow too. Maybe that's just what I've noticed, but I feel like that always works pretty well. Now, the last thing that we should talk about is the tweezers. I mentioned that a little bit earlier in the video. If you're going to be using the tweezers, which I would not recommend if you're a beginner at doing this, because you need to be extremely careful. You're not pinching your gecko's skin. You're not stabbing them with it. That kind of thing. You also got to make sure you're protecting the tips of it at all times with your finger or something in case your gecko were to randomly jump on you. You don't want them to get impaled by your tweezers because that would defeat the whole purpose of trying to get the skin off of them in the first place. So using the tweezers, I would say only if you're experienced with doing this. I usually keep the tips poked into my finger in case they were to jump. That way, if they did jump on accident or whatever, that they don't get impaled. Tweezers can be a little bit sharper. These ones have a little bit more of a rounded tip. But the tweezers work well with stuck shed, especially on the toe tips, because sometimes you need to kind of unravel the shed a little bit and pull it off that way, kind of like my sock demonstration. And you really can't do it with your fingers or your Q-tip. It's just not sturdy enough to get the stuck shed off. So sometimes it can come in handy. I am recommending that you're very careful. But with that being said, this is what I do to get stuck shed off of my geckos or dried food. Hopefully this video helped you out. If it did, please drop a like down below. And I also just want to say thank you to everybody who voted for my design. Unfortunately, I did not win, but I still appreciate your votes if you took the time to go over there and do that. With that being said, I hope to see you guys in my next video.